This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, or so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. So today, the episode is a little bit different in that I unpick a topic which I've never looked at so far. And we're going to look at mental toughness in military settings. So my guest is Tim Bradshaw, who's recently released a book called Because I Can. It came out a few days ago. I really would check it out. We go on to chat about the book, talk about different chapters in the book. We look at the battlefield in Afghanistan. We talk about surviving earthquakes in Mount Everest. So yeah, we talk about a range of different situations, real high pressure environments, and how you can best deal with them. Enjoy. So hi Tim, I'm really looking forward to this interview. To start with, would you be able to explain to the listeners a little bit more about your background?
Hi David. Yeah, me too. In short supply. Basically, I finished school and went straight to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. Arguably too young, really. I think I was just about 19, give or take, when I started. And I served the army for a number of years, obviously as a commissioned officer, and then came out of the military, moved into the sort of training world, but then subsequently went back again later on and worked in what we sort of know as human intelligence, which is really all about people. So understanding how to work with other people to create the outcomes and results that we want to do. And then following on from there, me and a few friends of mine, we wanted to make a little bit of a difference, really. So we set up a training company, but we're big believers in practicing what we preach. So over the years, we've set ourselves a number of challenges, a number of escapades. In 2015, we tried to climb Mount Everest to make people aware of that it's okay to ask for help. One of the things we found with mental health issues, particularly with the military, was that the services and the help was there, but persuading big, tough people to ask for it was more challenging than making the services available. 2018, probably of interest to your listeners, we took on a year of challenges. So every month for a year, we took on an endurance challenge. And if anybody's interested, it was an absolutely terrible idea. So we did everything from half Ironman triathlons to cycling L'Étape to Tour, then mountain stages, the Tour de France, and the Three Peaks Challenge, which in fact we're doing again this year with one of our clients. So all sorts of weird and wacky stuff, really, because I just think if you're going to step outside your comfort zone or ask people in our training sessions to step outside their comfort zone, then you've kind of got to be prepared to do that yourself. Although that is a decision I regret essentially on a daily basis.
I love the sound of those challenges. That sounds fantastic fun. And as you say, it is certainly going to stretch people. One of your points there about, I suppose, probably men and more in particular, and actually asking for help in a mental health setting. What do you think the answers are there to help improve that?
I think it's really interesting. So on the one hand, I'm quite a big advocate of social media, but on the other hand, I think we need to be really wary. And all I mean is I don't think there's anything wrong with social media per se. I just think what it does is it personifies a load of sort of perceptions that people have. And I think you sort of tend to see people's best lives or what they want to see of your best lives. And for me, we've created this slightly weird world where everybody assumes that the successful people are all okay all of the time. And that's not real. So to come back to your question, David, actually, probably the most common question I get asked when I'm sort of doing after dinner speaking or whatever is, don't you ever want to quit and don't you ever doubt yourself? And the answer is, yeah, literally every single day. And every time I do it, I wish I'd taken up golf aged 8. Sorry, pastime, not a sport. There you go, a bit of controversy for you. But actually, no, joking aside, and I think that sometimes there's this perception that the super athletes, whatever they are, whether they're mountaineers, track and field athletes, or Formula One racing drivers, are perfect all the time. And that's just not true. And for me, and we were talking about it before, be courageous, don't man up. And the one is, the one requires you to kind of think about it for a minute, work out what challenges you're going to face, accept the fact that that's going to be uncomfortable and that you're going to have bad days and that that's normal. and then take that on. And that's courageous rather than mindfully kind of just being told to man up, which is really not useful. So I think we have to start with an acceptance that if I'm about to go and do a 4-hour training session or a long run or a climb or whatever it might be, I'm going to question myself and I'm going to doubt myself and I'm going to perhaps wish that I'd taken the shorter route or slowed down or whatever it might be. And that's normal. And that's completely normal. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're not going to be brilliant. It just means you're normal. And then, as I say to everybody, just don't quit. That's all you've got to do.
Yeah, you're right. I think people try to think that they're robots at times, aren't they? But if you're living, you're breathing, you're going to have self-doubts. You're going to get caught up thinking too much in the future and the past. That's just the way our brains are designed.
Yeah, and I think when you're doing business or climbing, I remember when we first went to Mount Everest and we sat down and we had a look at all this stuff. And yeah, essentially, Mount Everest can go, down to minus 40 degrees centigrade and 100-mile-an-hour winds. And you're going to be there for weeks on end in a tent. And it's not realistic to think that you could sleep in a tiny tent for 6 weeks at a time in those weather conditions and not have some mornings where you wake up and wished you'd done essentially anything else. That's completely okay. And I always chuckle. I read these books and particularly around Everest in particular, and there's all these people that kind of, I found my soul and I found myself and I was really in tune with the mountain. I can assure you I wasn't. I was cold, miserable and questioned myself on an hourly basis. But I think most people do. And I think you just have to accept the fact that that makes you normal.
Surely as well on an Everest expedition, you've got the sleep and fatigue. That's got to be a challenge in itself. And then the mind games that go with that.
Yeah, and I think I think the same is true as everything. And interestingly enough, one of the things we were taught was this kind of self-awareness and self-acceptance. So our doctor, Kirsty, she said to us, look, when you're at high altitude, as an example, you're going to find sleeping quite difficult. So rather than getting frustrated about the fact you're not getting to sleep, and I'm sure some of your listeners have done that, you almost get yourself more grumpy that you're not sleeping, accept the fact that you're resting. And okay, that's not as good as sleeping, but it's better than not resting. So I'll take that win. And I think the same is true probably of stress and anxiety, whether that's in a business context. I'm sure most athletes don't sleep perfectly the night before a race, even though they'd like to, whatever that race looks like. And just for somebody to say to me, actually, accept that, that's okay. Of course you're not going to sleep brilliantly. You've got a massive presentation tomorrow or the biggest race of your life tomorrow. So therefore, don't beat yourself up for it, accept it, but do the best you can. I don't know. I guess what they're trying to say is control the bits you can control, which is what I quite like.
Yeah, most definitely. Just thinking back, I've got 2 young children and neither of them were very good sleepers. That was something I used to do. I used to think, right, I'm in bed here for 9 hours. Okay, I might be awake for some large chunks and the kids would wake you up and stuff. But yeah, rest. Yeah, just that mindset around rest was so important. Anyway, moving on from that. In terms of your career in the military, how would you define mental toughness in that sort of context and environment?
I think it's really funny actually. So I get asked sort of similar questions sort of quite a lot actually. It makes me think about it. And I think the two things for me that are quite interesting is, if I was trying to sum up first of all the military career, I think I said beer earned. I mean, I appreciate being athletes, we don't drink beer, but we do occasionally. Maybe it's an Erdinger that doesn't have alcohol in it. But actually, I think it's that sense of camaraderie that comes from shared experience and that understanding that we all have good days and bad days. Because we obviously used to do sort of physicality on a daily basis, whether that's running the rucksacks on, whatever it might be. And when you are with the same group of people day in, day out, going through those kind of tests, and certainly for me in the intelligence stuff that we did, we had a lot of exercises that were not necessarily super physical, but they required you to think quite quickly and solve problems at 2-3 o'clock in the morning with not much sleep. And you suddenly realize that you have days when you can do it and days when you can't, and your colleagues often move around. So I think you start to realize that we're always stronger together, particularly if we've got a diverse team. And when I say diverse, I mean people that think differently, communicate differently, operate differently. And we have this expression of covering each other's blind spots. So actually what starts to happen is you start to relish the fact that you think or communicate differently to me, because it means that when I'm not doing so well, you're doing brilliantly and vice versa. And then rather than me kind of think to myself, oh, blimey, David's doing so much better than me at this, I think, brilliant, David's got this, which means I can switch off for a minute. knowing that tomorrow or tonight or whatever happens next, that will go the other way round. And I'm like, well, David, smash the next one. Right, I've got the baton now. I'm going to run with it now. And I think for me, the biggest thing within the military in terms of kind of resilience, if you like, mental toughness, is just don't quit. And I guess probably the single biggest thing I noticed in terms of transition was I was very used to being surrounded by people where we were going to make stuff happen. So if we had a mission to complete or an exercise to complete or a challenge to finish, there was never any question that we weren't going to get there. So we accepted the fact that it might be difficult, or the pathway to get there, if you like, may not be the one we kind of pre-programmed. We used to have this brilliant expression, which is no plan survives first contact with the enemy. You come up with this brilliant plan. I guess it's like rugby, isn't it? You come up with this brilliant plan. This is what we're going to do. And then nobody told the All Blacks, you know what I mean? They go and do something completely different. You're like, oh, man. But I think it was this acceptance that together we were never going to take a step backwards. It might be a pretty small step forward sometimes, but never a step backwards. And for me, that's what sums up that kind of military resilience.
So in effect, I think what you're saying there is obviously mental toughness. You need to be able to deal with pressure, deal with challenges. And if you can trust other people as well as trusting yourself and work collectively together, then you're going to make things a lot easier.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let you into a secret of selection. Don't tell anybody else, obviously, apart from all the people that are listening. But I remember some of the hideous things we used to have to do on the kind of selection phase. And I quickly realised that nobody was counting how many push-ups I did. Actually, all they wanted to see was that I was prepared to turn myself inside out and not quit. And I remember years later talking to one of the instructors. He said, yeah, I'm not counting how many push-ups 25 people do. How'd you do that? But it was all about that mental toughness. That's what we're looking for. Because what they were basically saying was that at that level, we can teach you to do more push-ups, right? That if your physical performance is not where you want it to be, you can improve your physical performance. What's more challenging is to give somebody that attitude of not taking a step backwards. And actually, there are things you can do to help with that, provided people are prepared to step on. And the book, that's what the book is all about. Is, here's a few practical things that I've learned, arguably the hard way, to then help you become more resilient. Nobody's born resilient. You become resilient, and you have days when you deal with it and days when you don't.
I like the fact that you've said that about that you're not born with resilience, and again, that would be the same for mental toughness. So, just if you want to expand a little bit more on your book, firstly, where did the title come from? Because I Can.
I think for me, it's something we've used as a company for ages, to be honest, and it signifies an attitude of I'm going to do this because I can do this, and it's about being part of your own solution. And for me, when you say I'm going to do this because I can rather than because I can't, then actually what happens is your whole mindset changes. So it's about developing, we call it a because I can mindset, which is I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to be part of my own solution. And then what happens is you then start to look initially for ways to make something work. And you then start to look left and right to do whatever you need to do to make it happen. And there's a real light bulb moment actually when that happens, rather than when you sort of put all the barriers up. And I think I sort of allude to it probably early on in the book. Forgive me, the bit writing that book is without question the furthest I've ever been from my comfort zone. So I try really hard not to read it. But actually, I sort of joke and I say we've all been there. We've all been Friday night. Kids have gone out, whatever it might be, and you're sitting there and you've got a glass of wine with a few of your mates, and you say, let's go and walk up a hill, or let's run a 5K, or whatever it might be. And everybody sort of goes, yeah, and starts Googling fun runs and what have you. And then the following morning, what then happens is everybody finds a whole reason as to why you can't do it. I've got to pick the kids up, I've got to work, I haven't got a car this weekend, I don't know, whatever it might be. So you essentially talk yourself out of it. Just one of your friends says, we're going to do this. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to do this. And then what happens is the following week you train and you go and do your 5K or whatever it was you were going to do. And then what happens is suddenly you've got a load of mates that also finish the 5K, maybe new mates. And then the same Friday night you're sitting around having dinner, only now the 10 people around the table all did the 5K. So the 5K becomes a 10K and the 10K becomes a marathon. And to me, that's what that because I can mindset is all about, is about that, okay, it's not going to be easy. I don't have the skills I need at the minute. And that's about being courageous. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to rush out and just turn myself inside out, although I have done that in the past, if I'm honest, which is a mistake, I might add. But actually, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to work out what I need to know, what skills I need, what intelligence I need to make it happen. And then I'm going to be courageous and go and find those skills and those steps. And that then all kind of comes together, hopefully, to get you at least to the start line.
So in mental toughness terms, that basically, for people who are familiar with the Peter Clough's 4 C's model, I think what we're talking about in some ways is commitment here, and the fact that, you know, a mentally tough person is likely to set goals, and then they're going to make promises to themselves to drive through and commit.
Yeah, David, I think you're absolutely right. But I think for me, it's almost a little bit like if you go to gym on day one and you decide you're going to do deadlifts or something, whatever it might be, right? You're not tough on a deadlifter on day one, are you? So you probably use an empty bar first time out, or maybe you put 10 kilos on it or something. I don't know. 6 months later, you may well be a deadlifter. You know, maybe you got 120 kilos on that bar and you're going for it. And for me, mental toughness is a little bit the same. Provided you've got the spark, which is a because I can attitude bit, provided you've got a little bit of a spark because I'm going to have a go, even if you're not mentally tough at that point, if you see it like a training regime, was it Couch to 5K or whatever it is?
That's right.
So what you then do is you build up that mental toughness, a step at a time. And I've certainly done that. I've had to rehab from a few injuries over the years, and I'm doing so now. And I think what you also then do is you say, right, I'm going to go out for a run today. I don't know how far or how fast I'm going to go because I don't know how I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling good, I'm going to go further and faster. If I'm not feeling good, then I'm going to accept the fact that I went for a run and take that. But then what happens is you get in a habit of saying yes. And to me, that's the first step to mental toughness. Because inevitably what happens is you get fitter and stronger. So, of course, the balance shifts. Does that make sense? Suddenly you're running further and faster, and the off days get less and less, and it kind of works.
Yeah, most definitely. So, in effect, you're building positive momentum onto, as you say, through good habits. So, tell me a little bit more about Chapter 1. The title is Focus on Intelligence, Not Information.
It's kind of our buzzline. I think the world at the moment, right, is absolutely crazy, isn't it? It's like literally bonkers. The sheer volume of information that gets kind of fed into us at the moment, whether that's social media, internet, news channels. I can't remember how many news channels there are at the moment. It's probably 20 odd. So we've just got this vast amount of information that comes in, and it's also really easy to ask help and information from people you don't even know, right? Various forums and chat boxes. And I'm not saying any of these things are bad, but what I'm saying is there's so much going on. Whereas what you then need to do is filter out what's not real and turn it into intelligence. And, to be intelligence as a very minimum starting point, it needs to be accurate, timely and relevant. Accurate, timely and relevant. So, this person that's telling me I need to eat this or run that or do this, do they know that? Or actually, did they read that in this, the same person you read it off? So, in other words, filter out all of the background noise and focus on what's actually real. And then later on, I think we talk about fear, which is an extension of the same thing. So fear is false expectation appearing real. In other words, what happens is we create our own pressure and anxiety with this sort of coulda, woulda, shoulda. And in fact, quite often we'll see that on the news. So you'll read a news article and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. If that happens and this will happen and the whole world's going to end. Only none of those things have actually happened yet. So what happens is we create anxiety around stuff that, that might happen. Whereas what we actually need to do is focus on what's happening right here, right now. What can I control and what is going to impact on me right now? So it's an extension, if you like, a physical extension, intelligence, not information. Filter out the background. I liken it to bandwidth. So I'm sure over the last 2 years, we've all been sitting there and clearly yours is the most important meeting in the household, obviously. Somebody else in the household has another meeting, which as far as they're concerned is the most important meeting in the household. You've got kids trying to stream games. Somebody else is trying to watch Netflix and some lunatic taught your parents how to use FaceTime. And all of a sudden, the whole thing starts to crash. And what you have to do to get it working again is start turning off the least important bits, right? So that's an extension of intelligence and automation. Filter out the bits that don't work, create bigger bandwidth to deal with the emergency problem. And then as the bandwidth comes back, you filter back out again.
Yes, I suppose a question you need to ask yourself there is, this information, is it actually helping me or not? And then take a step back and look at the different types of information that are coming through, where you're getting it from, if it's watching the news, if it's listening to the radio, if it's just social media. And as you say, create some better routines and habits there. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about Everest? I noticed you mentioned you were caught up in an earthquake at some point.
It's funny, isn't it? You sort of talk about best laid plans and all of that. So our aim, if you like, was to stand on the highest point on earth and tell people that it was okay to ask for help. Good plan. So we spent the best part of 2 years training and getting the right intelligence and working it all out. And we wanted to go via Mallory's original route, which is on the kind of northern side. And of course, there's a famous story of him, disappearing and never coming back, etc., etc. And there was an awful lot of there's an interesting book called Into the Silence, and the book was basically suggesting that a lot of the soldiers or ex-military, because of course almost everybody was ex-military in those days, post First World War, and that they were suffering with shell shock. So quite a lot of the accounts you read of them kind of almost seeming callous about what happened and what they saw in bodies is because if you just come from the trenches in the First World War, then essentially anything you saw after that was going to be tame, right? Horrific as that is to say. So we kind of, let's replicate that and tell people it's okay to ask for help. And then, unfortunately, we were there in 2015, which some of your listeners will, if you're into sort of mountains, will be aware, was when the biggest natural disasters to hit the entire Tibetan and Nepalese regions sort of kicked off, and the earth tremors then triggered avalanches, and the whole thing became, pretty catastrophic, really. And again, suddenly everything you'd worked towards, your whole kind of value and belief set gets shifted, and all that really matters is making sure that as many people as possible, are okay. And then, in fact, trying to get home, because Shanxi, one of the towns, literally fell into a river. So the way that we had planned to go home now wasn't possible. And again, I often use that when we're talking of an example of, okay, what we now need to do is focus on what we can do. And we could sit here and we could talk about the kit that we've lost and the people that we've lost and all the rest of it. But none of those things, hard as that is to say, will help us get out of this situation. So you have to focus on what's possible. What routes home have we got? What kit have we got left, etc.
So I would imagine you were anxious at different times there. You would have to acknowledge that anxiety and then switch yourself into that can-do mentality.
Yeah, I think we don't need to. I think sometimes we confuse a can-do attitude with a kind of lack of empathy. It's actually not true. We quite often say, don't be a Spartan leader. I'm sure everybody's watched 300 or one of those various, sort of spin-offs. And actually, in my experience, although it makes good movies, being a Spartan leader just actually opens the gap between the led and the leader. Because, I always laugh. I'm sure, David, you've been for a run at some point with somebody and they didn't tell you how far or how fast, and they kick off a certain pace and you think, I can't keep this up. This is outrageous. I'm never able to do this. And what happens is you send yourself into we call it a catastrophic spiral. Can't do it, won't do it. Of course, you start to switch yourself off, essentially, which is obviously not good. Whereas actually, if you said to yourself, if you go for a run and you say to yourself, how far, how fast, how long, you stand a better chance. Then when you're running, when the person next to you suddenly looks tired, we still all the time in military, 20 of you go out and you think, my goodness me, I'm the weakest link. I can't keep up. This isn't working. And then the guy next to you starts to blow a bit and starts to, this is horrendous. And you go, oh, thank God for that. It's not just me. And all of a sudden it's all okay again, right? I can see by the laugh on your face, we've all been there, right? So actually in that disaster situation, when you go, wow, this is all pretty horrendous, what are we going to do? It actually puts everybody else at ease because you're giving them permission for this to be not a cool situation. Then when you say, well, actually, guys, and we have this expression about provide reassurance and direction, reassurance is, I think it's horrendous because it is, but together we're going to work it out. And the direction is, this is what we're going to do now to start to become part of our own solution. And for me, that's much better than a kind of Spartan, I'm fine, are you weak? You know, what are you talking about? Because I think if that happens, although our movie persona is show no weakness, actually the reality is, I think you isolate the team if you do that.
Yeah, you've actually just helped me there, because I've been going through that battle for the last 6 months or so, where as age creeps up on you, your running times go backwards. So yeah, I'll have to listen to this episode again a few times.
Luckily, mine were never that quick in the first place, David, so I don't worry about it too much.
Tell me a little bit more about that, where you talk about vulnerability then, and as a leader and showing your vulnerability, and how that can then go on to help the people around you.
I think what happens is maybe it's a result of our access to information that we were talking about earlier. But I think we have a tendency to take all things to extremes, don't we? So if you just watch the Oscars, so you know, when we talk about vulnerability, instantly people imagine you breaking down into tears and being in touch with your soft side and all this. And I don't know, that's not necessarily true, but I think to be vulnerable is, there's almost something wrong with you. If you're in any of these situations and the adrenaline starts to drive and the fight or flight mechanism starts to kick in, you know, it's completely natural for you, therefore, to question yourself. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a leader sharing that emotion with their teams, because I think it closes the gap between you and the teams. Now, I like to set up what we call a pull, not a push, right? So actually, imagine, David, you and I were in this situation. I could take option one, which is the sort of Spartan leader, this is all fine, man up, what you're doing, come on. And my belief is that all that happens at that point is you start to question yourself even more. I shouldn't have been here. I'm not up to this job. I'm the wrong person for the job, etc., which is not what I need right now. And ironically, as a leader, even if that was true, I need you on your best game. I don't need you on so even if that was true, I still need to get out of you the very best that I can get out of you regardless. Whereas actually, if I set up a pull and I say to you, hey, David, look, this is horrendous. I feel awful. I'm not sure what to do. But you know what? We're not going to quit. We're going to keep going forward. You're more likely to think, oh, he feels a bit like me, so I'm not a failure. But actually, he's got the courage to keep stepping forwards. So I guess I better find some courage too. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but I think you see the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, because as you say, really, if someone isn't going to be showing their vulnerabilities, then it's very easy as the other person to start getting into comparison mode, isn't it? Where you put yourself down, and it really impacts your confidence and trust in your ability. When you were working in a military setting, Afghanistan, for argument's sake, would you see that type of leadership, or was it very different? Yeah,
I think one of the things that's quite interesting, again, you know, we all watch SEAL Team or whatever it is. And I think it always appeals to a very macho all of the time. But actually, in my experience, the most of the conversations we had were looking after each other, actually, because the guys, they're so well trained and they're so focused on what they've got to do professionally that's never in question. You know, it's like, I don't know what your sort of favorite sport or whatever is, but if you look at any elite sports person, you don't need to question their performance, if that makes sense. You know, that's what they do day in, day out. So your job is to get them in the right frame of mind, at least to sort of, we call it set conditions for success. So in other words, relieve pressure, not add pressure, create a safe environment to allow David to do what he does best. And in my experience, even with the military, particularly with smaller teams in high pressure environments, actually, if you can get the people around you to make sure they're okay, you know, they've managed to call home, or their emails are getting through, or actually somebody's written to them, or whatever it might be, if you can take care of those little things, they're absolutely capable of delivering the professional performances that are required, because they train day in, day out to do that. That's the kind of almost the easy bit. So actually, if you can look after each other, I think, is it holistically, then what you're doing is you're setting conditions of success. So that team will then go and do what it does best. Whereas if people are distracted because, I don't know, the children are ill, or they haven't been able to phone home, or whatever it might be, then actually there's a danger that you don't see their best A game, because they're half a step behind the pace, not because they're not up to it professionally, but actually because 5 minutes beforehand, their mind is somewhere. Their mind is somewhere else. Understandably, I might add.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you see it quite a lot with like the highly motivated and talented athlete or sports person who puts so much pressure on themselves, and they work themselves up into a frenzy, really, where they just can't perform to the level that they should be able to. Whereas, as you say, just by relieving pressure and just trying to take it off a little bit, it frees them up.
I actually think sport, I think this is one area in particular where I think sport is firmly ahead of business. And I guess I kind of have put in both camps in some respects. And what I mean by that is sport seems to have, to some extent, embraced the kind of psychology aspects of it. And sport seems to have embraced the fact that you can be the Formula One world champion, or you can be a All Blacks rugby player or whatever. You still need your head to be in the right place, and that there's nothing wrong with having somebody coach you psychologically to create that. And that's certainly not weakness. Whereas I think in a business context, what we see a lot nowadays is we still beat people up. You're not performing, you need to perform better. We're behind on the monthly targets. You need more. But none of those things help you solve the problem. And I'm just this big believer that if somebody's making a mistake because they're under pressure, surely it's pretty obvious that adding pressure, if it's the pressure that's caused a mistake, you're just going to get another mistake. That doesn't mean that after the game is over, whatever that looks like, or the deal is over, you shouldn't debrief and go, okay, where were we, what skills were we missing? What intelligence were we missing? How do we improve our performance for next time? Of course. But at that moment, that absolute moment, and this comes back down to mental toughness, I think we assume that mental toughness is crack it on. Whereas I would argue as a leader, the mental toughness is to go, actually, what I need to do right now is put David at his ease, take the pressure out of it, which is probably the last thing in the world I want to do because I feel under pressure, to create a gap for him to operate in. Because if he's got that gap to operate in, we stand the best chance of getting him back onto performance. Later, when we're all in the training room or over dinner, we can work out how that happened in the first place and can we fix it, for sure. But our outcome right here then has got to be to get the best result we can, right?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a nice way to finish and to the way you've framed mental toughness in that respect. Would you be able just to give the listeners 3 key takeaways from our conversation? Yeah,
let's think for a minute. I think number one is accept the fact that it's not perfect. So set your own expectation, right? So in other words, I'm about to take on a new task, a sporting task. I'm going to try and run faster than I ever done before, whatever it might be. Accept the fact that is not always going to go well. So in other words, set the right expectation and accept the fact you're going to have a bad day, and that's normal. So accept the bad days, I guess, as to what they are. I think the second one is probably remember that the majority of anxiety, or often anxiety, is caused by a perception of what's happening around us. So fear, false expectation, appearing real. And that is work out what's real, work out what's going on around you, and only deal with the bits that are actually going to impact you right now. And then as that kind of pressure relieves, as that anxiety relieves, you will find that you have a bigger capacity to deal with stuff going forwards. And then I think the third thing to remember is that wanting to quit is normal, just don't.
That's fantastic. The insights and those takeaways are great. I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that. Whereabouts can the listeners find you? Should they want to reach out to you, Tim?
Probably the best one is probably LinkedIn, to be honest. Timothy Bradshaw on LinkedIn. We're on I'm on Instagram and Facebook and the like as Tim Bradshaw anyway. But in fact, as we've connected, David, I think on LinkedIn, haven't we? LinkedIn sort of wired through to my phone and everything else. So always really, really happy to hear from anybody and discuss what's going on. And if you've heard some stuff today that you agree with, or even that you don't agree with, then by all means reach out and we can discuss it some more. Brilliant.
Excellent. And I believe your book, Because I Can, is going to be out on the 19th of April. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think what the listeners need to remember is I'm a thicky soldier, essentially. So the book is absolutely not a literary masterpiece, but what it absolutely is a kind of, we call it the robust guide to being effective. And a lot of stuff we've talked about, hopefully there's like bite-sized bits. You can have a read, you can take it out. And next time you find yourself under pressure, whether that's business or sporting, there's a few bits in there you might go, actually, I'm going to do that. And that's what's aimed at, really. Kind of a user guide getting stuff done.
Brilliant. Okay, well, all of those details will go in the show notes, and yeah, much appreciated for your time, Tim.
No worries at all, David. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
So that was a fascinating episode, which I really enjoyed recording. Now, when we're talking about military settings there, and a large part of this conversation linked to emotional control, which is a very, very important element of mental toughness. And it was very clear to me that the way Tim described different situations, of the importance of not getting things out of proportion, of remaining cool, calm, collected in such difficult situations that he discussed. Now, the person who is mentally tough and has a high degree of emotional control will be able to adjust their emotional responses in these different situations. They're going to be able to mask nervousness, and they're really going to be able to channel their emotions in ways that really help them overcome such challenges and remain focused. And as Tim alluded to, the emotionally controlled individual is also likely to be very solution orientated in the way they approach things. They won't get too head up by what they're feeling and what's going on around them. They'll be solely thinking about what it is that they need to do in order to get themselves out of the situation. So now I'm going to continue this theme about emotional control, and I'm going to actually come at this from a slightly different angle. So we're going to assume that you are a person who has a high degree of emotional control. Now, if you're a coach, for argument's sake, and you're working with people who struggle with their emotional control, they're less stable in that respect. It might be very, very difficult for you to actually put yourselves in their shoes. So what I'd like you to do, if you are one of these people, is just think about it. What is actually going through the mind? What are these people who are less stable emotionally thinking? What are they feeling? What do they actually experience? And if you're not sure, go on and ask them. It could be really, really important. Another thing to consider, if you are someone who does have a high degree of emotional control, is how, by not revealing your emotional state to others, by being so calm and collected, how do other people then respond to you? Do they see it as a good thing, or do they see it as a bad thing? Because it could be that they actually can't read you and aren't really sure what it is that you are experiencing there. You might, if you're a confident person as well, actually come across as quite aloof. So it's something to factor in there. And then if these people have actually seen you in the past of being quite calm, cool and collected, and then all of a sudden you surprise them by showing emotion an awful lot, this might unsettle them. So again, that is something that you need to factor in if you are one of these calm, cool, collected people who oozes emotional control. So I hope my insights here have just given you something else to factor in and think about. If you do want to hear more about my insights and different opinions there around a variety of elements of mental toughness and sports psychology and performance psychology in general, or if you want to contact me directly and get a quick response, why don't you join me in my Facebook community, which is growing all the time, called the Sports Psychology Hub. I'd love to see you in there and contributing. Have a fantastic week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.